Welcome back to another episode of Angry Viking Man Travels Through History or whatever. Today I decided that with this I wanted to drink a lovely cup of tea. I have some cookies because sometimes I'm a boring old man and I love it. But to all that end, today we are doing chapter 40 of the Varangian. So, chapter 40. 1051. The fleet sailed together south along the last of the Norway coast. Hvitbjorn and the Ragnar had managed to secure place enough on one long ship for themselves and Niels, Stephanos, and Skadhild. Niels wore a buckler strapped to his injured right hand, and had been practicing fighting with this method.
I hear that this Kulfr is the one who killed Olaf, the old Saint King, Harald's own brother,
Niels whispered harshly to the rest. Oh, there's no way that's true, Ragnar responded. He'd be strung up by the neck if the king knew that.
I have heard the same thing, Skadhild said. There was apparently some politicking with this Kulfr's brother Finn, who somehow brokered the peace with the king for his brother. So now, the brother is favored, even though he was the one who killed Olaf.
That's not what Harald is like, Hvitbjorn said.
I think the no-name person is right here. I miss my friend Harald and have not talked with him in a long time. I should go and hail him. He will remember me. Steffi, that may not be the best idea. And then I think he knows you are riding with us, but you never know. He may have recognized you when he destroyed the camp. No, he didn't see me. I am quiet. Also, I never attack Harald's men, only the Magnus King. Hvitbjorn rolled his eyes. I remember you saying that. But can there be any other reason? Look there. That's Kulfr's fleet ahead of us. Harald is allowing him the place of first attack, Niels said excitedly. We should come raiding with the party next year, too.
Best way to make money, Hvitbjorn agreed. Harald's rule in Norway had been mostly peaceful. His outright destruction of Einar Tambarskjalfir had been treated with much hostility across the kingdom. However, he'd put the affair into Finn Arnesson's hands. The man was tasked with bringing a peace offering in the form of a weregild to the peoples of the Tambarskjalfir's allegiance. The man had to negotiate, for he knew that any who was loved by Harald, would most likely die at his foe's hands, and so asked that his brother Kalfr be renewed from exile and restored all his lands and titles. The agreement was struck, and Finn paid for the deaths that caused so much fear and hatred in the kingdom. Now that very brother was at the head of Harald's raiding army, sailing south to continue making war on Swain Ulfson and the Danes in his lands. The Norway king hadn't forgotten the insults sent against him by the man or the old king, and he made his war now to repay those insults. The battle ahead of them would be a tough fight, they knew. Harald and Kalfr apparently wanted to strike a decisive blow against the Danes on a beach where it was known that Danish forces would be readying. The plan was for Kalfr to land and distract them, while Harald landed after and swept in to destroy them against Kalfr's battle. If it worked, it could cripple Svein so much he was forced to flee or to come to the negotiating table with a massive loss as his first move. Such an outcome was perfect for Norway, and it made perfect sense to all who heard it. Well, I still hope there's plunder to be had on that beach, Skadhild said. Warring for the king's prestige and kingdom is all fine and well, but we're soldiers now, in some kind of way. We need pay.
How quickly we all become greedy for more than when the threat of real wealth looms in front of us, Niels said, shaking his head. Times were that we'd be happy to find a small village with food that we could raid. Now it must be riches we take from our foes, or it isn't worth the effort. Shut up, storyteller, she said, rocking to her left and shoving him with her shoulder. Niels was nearly toppled as his instinct was to grab the rope. As his instinct to grab the rope was impeded by his inability to do so with both hands, he managed still to hold fast and shoved back against her. That's enough of both, Hvitbjorn said. What? We're still days from the beach yet, Ragnar said. So long as the lassie here doesn't toss the poor wee bugger over the ledge, what's the harm? You are not the commander here anymore, Skadhild said. The comment itself wasn't overly dangerous. There were many here who'd been sailors and leaders of their own raids before Hvitbjorn, before Harald had folded them into a greater Norwegian fleet. Within this army were many commanders, captains, lords, leaders, chieftains. All were welcome, as long as they swore fealty and authority to the king. Command is not something easily forgotten, he replied, looking into the distance. The winds were blowing them swiftly, and many feared a storm would churn the seas before the day was done. Hvitbjorn knew well one would, but that the winds would push them far toward their aim before that happened. They may reach the Danelands before the next night, if that were so. Kalfr Arneson sat near the stern of his ship and conferred with his men about the battles to come. He held a cup of good, clean water and surveyed a small map that was made from vellum and showed the north coast of the Danelands. He was tall, had a head of sleek black hair and a well-kept beard that poured down the front of his chest. He sat in his armor and looked to be in control of all things that were his men, his ship, his advance battle plan. We'll fight them here, Lord, said one of his advisors. That is the plan, at first, of course, but my goal is to win this war for Harald. What? To show him how it is done? Asked another with a laugh. Nothing so petty. No, I want more than but permission. I want to gain the people's favor. Their king wars, but I win. This brought silence among them. Do you mean to take his place? Asked one, who then realized that he spoke of dangerous things and looked around nervously. Perhaps not. I have killed a king before. He spoke with a smile set against the seat back that was built into his lead ship. The story about Kalfr having been the one who struck down Olaf on the king's stone at Stiklestad were well known. Some believed the stories, but there would always be doubt. How could so important a man in one army find the most important man in another and be there to deliver the final blow unless it was prepared for him? He took the credit, and the story was enough to bolster the reputation of the man, but few knew the actual events. Lord, what are we doing for the battle? Asked his man Fjornen. We do what we do best. The ship's land will be under attack by arrows, but that's nothing we aren't ready for. Shields out first to make the beachhead, while our own archers return the attack to protect them. He pointed at different members of his retinue as he spoke the instructions. The ships should group together as close as they can so we can organize into a strong shield wall quickly. I think once they see we're landing like that and have the support of our own archers, they'll charge us and make an attempt to shatter our formation. Have the archers stay on the ship and keep the volleys falling. We hold in our strength and show the king our power on the beach. By the time the enemy is moving on us, Harald's ships will be landing.
If he's a commander worth half what he claims, he'll see the advantage to landing on the sides of our wall and attack as flank defense while we push. We'll take the center, asked Eric. Of course. That's part of the reason I was so glad to be given the first assault rights. No matter how many he cuts down or how brilliantly his forces maneuver the battlefield, it will be ours to glory. We land first, we hold the center, we push the middle and break the enemy. And then, when Swain comes to the table, I'll be there. He will know that it was not Harald of Norway who won the war, it was me. And he will have to make his concessions to the king, of course, but it shall be me. One more crushing victory for Alfr Arneson. He smiled as he spoke, utterly pleased with himself. Lord, I think Harald may try to beat us to the glory that you want to claim. What if instead of splitting his force to the flanks, he takes one side and tries to force a new middle with sheer numbers against the Danes? That's a fair thing. He would do exactly that. Just because he's allowed me the front doesn't mean he won't try and take the place from me. No, I think you are right, Eglin. That is the type of king he is. Everything is about reliving the glory of his youth. Still, he wants to be the conqueror on the field as well as the negotiation table. He scoffed. So, what do we do about that? Wait and see where he'll land to better plan our approach? Asked Fjornen. No. That would but give him more chance to choose the ground better for his own. It would be best if we arrive forward enough not to have any other option for him. When he lands, the battle lines will have already been formed. His only chance then will be to take the flank, or else he'd miss the battle entirely. Speed, then, is the best course for us to take. Kulfr looked back to the fleet Harald led and the darkness of the clouds behind their ships. The wind was dense and hinted at swiftness. And that begins with the storm. Keep flying the sails and use the storm to gain a lead. He won't be able to deny or to match. All our plans here hinge on the speed we can drive from the winds. Have each man ready to hold strong in the storm. We'll let the winds take us close and then stow the sail when we have enough of a lead. On to victory. Kulfr's men all cheered and readied themselves for the work that was to come. Surviving a storm on the North Sea was task enough. Sailing it was riding a wild horse that wanted at every moment to kill. The men of Kulfr's crew, on all ships, were good and brave men. They prepared to fight the seas before they landed, to fight the force of the Danelander. In the bright after rain of the next day, the fleet of Kalfrarneson approached the beach. The enemy were already set in their rank, but did not stand at the waterline to contest the landing. Instead, they waited, which suited Kalfr perfectly well. Ready to land, he called with his hand raised to the crew who rode behind him. Stow oars! He shouted as they were close enough now that their momentum would carry them on with the waves. The moment of dread quiet before the scrape of the ship on the sand was intoxicating. The gentle lap of the waves and the splash as the ship's prow continued to push through the water was all they could hear. Then the flurry of action fell upon them. The ship dug its way through the sand of the beach just as the arrows began to land, and Kalfr leapt from the prow with his shield held high. Forms fell beside him, and he was soon in the middle of a tight and well-formed shield wall. Archers launched volleys back and forth, and the rest of the ships landed, while the soldiers gathered and formed themselves into an army. Ahead, the Danes were already marching and closing the distance. This was it. The center would have to be made here, and Kalfr would be at the center. It's as you predicted, Lord, Galvier said. We hold them and fight here, and Harald will have to take the sights. I know, and get ready. We're about to meet their charge. As he spoke, the enemy's careful pace closed the distance, and the shield walls met. The booming of steel and the clashing of wood emerged over the cacophony of yelling, and the battle began. Blood sprayed into the air as the first man in the line was slain, and his life's blood was thrown around. The death of the first man to steal was marked by his scream and dramatic plummet to the ground. And he was a Danish man. This sight encouraged Kalfr greatly, and he let out a loud battle cry as he continued to stab with his sword over the edge of the shields. He felt the tip land on an enemy, but didn't know if he'd struck anything until he saw blood on the edge, and then he smiled. This day was his. We push up the beach. Is that wise, Lord? Asked Eric behind him. The more room we leave Harald to form up behind us, the better. We push, he called again, and he and his men started to press forward. Their push was met with much resistance, but they could feel soon that it was working. The enemy center was giving way. Once he knew this was working, Kalfr let his place in the line be taken by another and fell back between his own ranks to take the place of command from the back. Lord, if we keep pushing like this, the enemy will have an easy time circling us from the sights. We need only to hold as long as it takes for the reinforcements to get here. He looked around. But it would be a good idea to keep that from happening as well we can. Send command to the orders to keep their eyes on the side so that we don't get flanked so. Lord, the enemy is being reinforced, shouted an archer from up on the ship's railing. What? He asked in nearly a whimper. There's another group of the army coming down the beach, Lord. I can see them from here. Calford looked up at his men. Damned! I'm coming up. Hold a shield for me. He put his hands on the ship and pulled himself up to stand beside the man. Then he looked up the beach and saw a force as well armed and prepared as his own men. He pondered the tactic for a moment as the roar of battle wailed all around them. The archers on the sides need to keep working to quell their surrounding, but the middle archers need to rain down upon their middle. They could overrun us if they pushed. We need to retreat some. Where's Harald? Lord, you wanted to arrive soon ahead of Harald. That statement shocked his mind back into the glorious image he had of himself. Yes, that is right. We are here alone, awaiting the bolstering of our fight by the force of the king. But when he and his force arrive here, they will think that we have never had any need of their support. They will think the war is already done, as we have crushed this enemy. Oh, you men of the Arnason warriors! You push and fight in glorious honor and deeds for God and for your home. Fight and press this enemy up the beach, and we shall crush them on the rocks there. An arrow landed in the eye slit of the archer's helm and threw him back down the ship. The moment of it forced Kalfr to duck under his shield, but he was certain his words had already done the work to encourage his men further. He leapt down back onto the beach and found Beglin. We don't need to push anymore. We hold where we are. Retreat slowly to the ship line, but make them pay for every foot of ground they take. Harald and his army will be here soon, he panted. Yes, Lord. You heard him, man. There's no glory to be had if the odds are not great. Fight and push. Arrows! He yelled as he looked up and saw a volley of arrows falling. Those behind the fighting ranks put their shields up to protect themselves, and Kalfr watched as 3 arrows killed his men who were fighting in the shield wall. They fell, and the chaos in that instant allowed the enemy to breach past the line and start to lay into the men who were now without the protection of the wall. When this happened, he saw that there were only 3 ranks between him and the battling now. Where before he stood in the thick of the fighting, he now felt a strange spike of fear as he saw the line breaking toward him. Reform the line! Stand together! Push into the line now! He commanded, and the orders were carried along the rest of the men, and their discipline took over as they rushed to obey the orders. The line was reformed and held firm and quickly, but this was a hard order that was won with many wounds. Calfer had to look at his dwindling force in earnest now and realize that he'd lost many good warriors. "Where's Harald?" he asked more urgently now. Nervous, he climbed back onto the ship and looked back out over the water of the Sea of the North. And there, where he had expected to see a dozen ships with Harald's galley leading, he saw open, empty waters. Harald was nowhere. The spike of fear grew within him as the horror of his situation dawned on him. "Where the fuck is Harald?" "Lord, do you see the other fleet?" asked Deglin in a panic, fearing the worst. "This was my day. Lord, what do we do?" He looked left and right. The enemy were pressing every foot of advantage they had, and men were pushing in on the flanks now. The ships were not ready to shove off, and it would take too many men, too much space, and too long to get them ready to sail out into the water. They were trapped where they stood. The desperate battle was hard fought, even by the Danes, but the outcome was an inevitability. The Danish knew only that Harold's force of raiders were overconfident, and so hadn't sent as many warriors in this fight as they should have. It seemed to their leadership that if they were able to crush them in a brutal defeat on this beach, they may be able to cripple his armies. That done, it might not be a long time before he regained the strength to raid again. It might be a long time. And in that time, their own king Swein could organize raids against Norway in retaliation. Utter, cruel victory in this battle could secure the future they so desperately wanted. And that meant that every one of the Norse on this beach had to be killed. They fought on with that one savage goal in sight. On the ship, out in the distance, Hvitbjorn and his friends watched in silence as they saw on the horizon a great battle that was being fought. Their ships had slowed through the storm and had been scattered around the sea in the confusion. Only now had they managed to regroup in the fleet again. "We have to help them," Hvitbjorn said quietly. "You heard the orders, laddie. We weren't close enough. The winds wouldn't allow us. We're to head home now on the next tide and leave those poor buggers to death." "We could have made the beach for the battle," Niels said. "Yes, but keep quiet your voice," Skadhild hissed. "There was no accident here. The king must have ordered that this disaster happen and that the captains of the ships all agree on the cause. The winds and tides wouldn't allow us to go and help. We return to Nidaros calling this a defeat, and no one questions it out loud. Not now, at least." "There's no point in defying the order. Everyone is going to know what happened anyway. Harald will make sure of it. Kalfr killed Olaf. This is the king's justice upon him now. The vengeance of Harald is won by... God, it's both. He destroys the man who wronged him, and in doing so, he forces the Danes to fight a useless battle as well. Every death there is a victory for Harald. Harald has managed that his enemies both fight each other, and that the one he wants dead loses that fight. This will echo through our world. Everyone will know what happened when you are the king's foe. And God help any who calls himself the enemy of the King Harald." From the distance, and over the cold water, the battle sound swept across them. The chasing, the clashing of steel, and the screams of dying men. In quiet contemplation, they sat and listened to the ruin of an entire army. "What do you think the king will have to pay for a wergild for this?" asked Niels. "Knowing him, he'll never have to pay a silver. This is his payment. It's not like with the lord he had slain in his hall. That was outright slaughter. This he can claim was not his doing, though everyone will know what happened here," Hvitbjorn said. "Ready our oars! We make for north!" shouted the captain of the ship. Immediately, despite their collected fascination with the warring, they all began the process of lifting out their oars and fitting them through the ports and into the water. Look, Niels said, pointing with his bad hand as he helped Skadhild with the other oar. Oh, actually, excuse me. There he fucking is. All continued their work, but looked at where Niels gestured. On the impressive lead galley, standing resplendent in his armor and rich robes, stood the unmistakable figure of the king. Harald Sigurdsson stood tall and proud at the prow of his ship, the wind obliging to flutter his cape behind, adding to the nobility of his bearing. The action of bringing the oars to the water had been drilled into each of them with years of repetition, and so they could do so effectively and efficiently as they spoke. They were all ready to row in moments after the paddles touched the water. I haven't seen that face since that morning, Hvitbjorn said, when he took everything from me. He pat his hand on his shoulder, where the head of the wolf's skin rested. That was only 3 years ago, said Stephanos. Heave, you dogs! Shouted the captain, and they all pulled as one. The long ship lurched with a sudden force put on it, and it slowly started to glide north. How can he look so proud and powerful after what he just did? Said Niels. What do you mean, laddie? Asked Ragnar. What he just did was declare to the world how damn dangerous it is to oppose him. He's standing in much more there than his robe. He stands in the fullness of his kingship. By God, that has to be the most powerful he's ever felt. Think on what the White Cloak said. He made his two enemies fight each other and won that battle himself. Then I am surprised he's not standing taller, Skadhild said. I think I should vow to kill a man for what happened to me. Slavery is not good. Not good more for a woman. Aye, lassie, you're free now. I still dream of it, she said, shaking. She said with a shake of her head. You will be free. In time. It is a hard thing, and I know the thought still torments you. I know, though, that the gods will save you from this. Eventually, she wrote it. She nodded. Thank you, Niels. Maybe in time you will be right. The ship moved faster, though not as fast as the great galley of Harald. The whole fleet eventually caught the wind, and the oars were stowed as the sails were flown, and together they sailed away from the death and misery behind them. Well, that is the end of that chapter, and another one of the crazy true stories, apparently, of the life of King Harald. He had the forces, basically, the forces of Kalfr Arneson at the front of his army, and he wrote down in the saga that the winds would not permit him to approach the shore, so Kalfr fought that battle against Svein's Danish forces and got annihilated. And I think that is a brutal and extremely effective example of his kingship. The way he ruled, guy was just ruthless and powerful, exceedingly powerful. Yeah, definitely art of the war. Have your two enemies fight each other, that you might win that battle. So if ever you find yourself in a position to do something similar, fucking take it.